it's Penny here to talk about all the books that I read in July? Was it July? Also, that's a lie because I'm not going to talk about all the books. I read 25 books this month, and so luckily I did a mid-month wrap-up for the first 12. I will link that here if you want to go and watch that. But in this video, I'll talk about the last 13 books that I read in the second half of the month. And then as well, I am going to run this as a book battle, which means that I pair up all the books, and I know this is a big one, so I should move over. I pair up all the books and I battle them against each other, working our way up until we come to the champion of the month. And then whatever the champion is for the second half of the month, we'll put that up against the champion of the first half of the month, which was This Is How You Lose the Time War. Also, I've divided the branches of this tournament up into like a sci-fi section, a middle grade section, a fantasy section, which is a little bit YA and adult fantasy. We've got a manga style section, and then just a general graphic novel section. So I will leave timestamps down below if you just want to skip to particular sections, because we got a lot of books to get through. And with that in mind, let's start with round one. So for our first battle, we have The 100 by Cass Morgan up against Riot Baby by Tochi Onyebuchi. So The 100 is the source material for the 100 TV show, which I have watched the first 2 seasons of, and then I think I couldn't get access to any more seasons at the time, and I somehow have never gotten back to it. But I did really enjoy it, and I find it really hard to rate this book separately from the TV show because my brain has kind of combined them into one thing. So I know that my thoughts about the book are positively biased because I enjoyed the TV show. So if you haven't watched the TV show or heard about this book, what happens is there was some kind of nuclear disaster and the remains of humanity are now living on this space station off the planet, waiting for the world to become habitable again. And because they've got limited resources up on the space station, whenever anyone does anything wrong, they get killed straight away. Except for if you're under 18, then you get put in prison, and when you turn 18, you get a retrial. And in this book, they decide to send 100 of those under 18-year-olds down to Earth in order to test whether it might be safe again. So we're following all these different teens as they get sent down to Earth, and also they're all having flashbacks about what happened to them on the space station and how they got imprisoned. And I will admit that the flashbacks were much more interesting than what was happening on Earth. I wish that there had been more happening on Earth. I'm pretty sure in the TV show there was still some flashbacks, but there was a lot more happening on Earth. Also, a lot of the flashbacks where the different plot twists and reveals were, and unfortunately because I've seen the TV show, I saw most of them coming, and I can't really tell whether I would have seen them coming if I hadn't seen the TV show. And then right at the end, it introduced a whole bunch of new elements in preparation for the second book, which I didn't really even realize that it was going to be that much of a series. I thought it might be more of a standalone for the first book, even though I knew there was a series, but I just thought this first book would wrap things up more than it did. And at the end, all these new things coming in just felt a bit rushed. Still, overall, I really like the characters, I really like the concept, and I enjoyed reading it. Then Riot Baby follows this black family who live in this very violent neighborhood. The mother's always worrying about the children. And also everybody in the family seems to have some degree of psychic abilities, the daughter being the strongest. She can not only read people's thoughts and have premonitions, but she can move things around telekinetically and destroy things with her mind. So she's really struggling with some of the premonitions she can see. And also her brother does end up in jail, which again, she really struggles with what's the right thing to do, since given her powers, she can do almost anything. So I thought she was a really interesting character, and I really would have liked to get more of her powers and her struggle with what to do with them. But instead, this book focused more on the brother and just his experience of ending up in jail under false charges and being stuck in this neighborhood with all this gang violence and just finding his life led down a particular path regardless of his own decisions. So I thought those themes were really strong and there was a lot to learn there, but I just wanted more of the sister's story. And in fact, I think I just wanted more story. This was a really short story that audiobook, which I listened to, was only 4 hours, so that's super short. And I just think there were some bits to the story that really could have done with a bit more elaboration and a bit more explanation. It did seem like sometimes we just jumped into something and I didn't really understand how it had happened. And I mean, maybe I'm just dumb, but there were a few bits where I felt a bit lost. So we're straight into a battle that I feel like it's quite hard to decide on. And it's one of these ones where I think the 100 totally achieved what it set out to achieve, but what it set out to achieve was much less than what Riot Baby was trying to take on. And I think the 100 is more of a YA science fiction, whereas Riot Baby is like an adult fantasy / science fiction. It's getting into some quite important and intense themes. So it was trying to do so much more. And I did get some value from what it did towards expressing those themes. But I just think overall I enjoyed my reading experience of the 100 a lot more, because I was never confused during the 100. So I think I'm going to put the 100 through to the next round. I guess. Next we have our middle grade section. So we've got Howl's Moving Castle by Diana Wynne Jones up against Tunnels of Blood by Darren Shan. So Howl's Moving Castle is very well known because of the Studio Ghibli movie that was made based on it, but I have to say that I enjoyed the book a lot more. I just think that in the movie, even though they kept relatively true to the story, they've cut out significant pieces of the plot that when it all comes together at the end of the book, it's very satisfying, but the movie didn't really get that. And a lot of things in the movie don't really make sense, whereas in the book, they are explained quite well, even though it's very whimsical and nonsensical and very like fairy tale-esque. It still makes sense within the logic of the world. And I thought the magic, again, it was really weird, but it made sense. And I really liked the way that it was used in the story. Also, there is a link to our real world, and I wasn't expecting that, but I thought that was quite a nice touch as well. So I think I'm probably gonna rewatch the movie, and maybe I will pick up on more things that they did include from the book, which didn't really make sense when I watched it, but maybe they will when I watch it now, having read the book. Maybe. This is also the beginning of a series, so I am going to read some more books in the series because I really like the writing and the ideas. Then we have Tunnels of Blood by Darren Shan. This is the third book in the Cirque du Freak series, which is a favorite of a lot of people from their childhood. And we're following this kid named Darren Shan, which you might notice is the author's name because he's pretending that this is his real life story. But I suspect it's not true. He ends up as the assistant to a vampire, and in this one they go chasing a serial killer eventually. I'm not sure that I liked this one as much as I liked the first two books in the series, but it still was relatively fun. Also, I will admit that near the beginning, I thought I had it all worked out. I knew exactly what was going to happen. And I was wrong. So I'm definitely not as smart as I think I am. Also though, I do want to call out that the plot twist is kind of reliant on that thing where the main character doesn't tell you what they're thinking. And so suddenly you're surprised, oh, that's what they were doing all that time. And it didn't really bother me in this book, but I did call out Sarah J. Maas when I read Crescent City for this same thing, so I feel like it's only fair to call this book out for it as well. This is a slightly easier battle than the last one because while I had fun reading both of them, I definitely enjoyed Howl's Moving Castle a lot more. I just felt like it was so creative and had so many wonderful ideas, and it was just kind of beautiful. I can see why Studio Ghibli decided to make a movie out of it. Okay, so on to some more adult-ish fantasy. So we've got The King of Crows by Libba Bray up against Fool's Fate by Robin Hobb. Both of these are last books in a series. So The King of Crows is the fourth book in the Diviners series, which is set in the 1920s, and it's all about these diviners who have different paranormal powers, and they're trying to, in this book, track down the King of Crows, who has like this army of ghosts, and they're trying to take him out. So the first thing I've noted down for this book is people died. Yay. So I did appreciate that after this 4-book big series, not everybody survived. I always feel a little bit ripped off when there's a big series and you're working up to fight the big bad and then everybody survives. It's like, really? Just what a waste of time. So I appreciate that Libba Bray was willing to make some characters pay the price for taking out this big bad. I also think the audiobook narration was really great. I actually, when I first started the first book, I wasn't that into the audiobook narration, but by the last book, I really had come to appreciate it. She does all the different voices really well. She sings a lot of the time, and I just think, even though I'll admit that this book series has not been my favorite, I think she did a great job of the audiobook narration. But as I was saying, this is not my favorite series. I do think the last two books in the series were better than the first two, but the first two were all just set up and mucking around, and the second two I do think could have been cut down quite significantly. Like, this could have been a trilogy of normal sized books rather than what is a 4-book series called? A quadrilogy? Quadruply? That's not right. It must have a name. A quartet! Oh dear. It's a quartet of really... Okay, so I don't know when that cut off, but I know there was an author's note at the end, and Libba Bray was talking about how she learnt so much about American history doing the research for this book, especially in regards to the more negative parts of history, so the racism and the xenophobia and just the violence and all of that. And I think a lot of the mucking around was really just her wanting to show a lot of that and include it in the story, which, I mean, I guess I can appreciate, but also I was a bit bored, and I do think she could have found a way to incorporate some of that without dragging things out so much. Then I also read Fool's Fate by Robin Hobbs. So this is the third and final book in the Tawny Man trilogy. The Tawny Man trilogy being the third trilogy in the realm of the Elderlings. So I've still got another quartet and another trilogy to go in that series, but I've been working my way through it and I've been really enjoying it. In this particular book, Fitz and a bunch of other characters are going off on a quest to try and find this dragon buried in ice, and for particular reasons they need to slay this dragon. But there's also a lot of arguments for why they shouldn't slay the dragon, and so the whole story is really about what's going to happen when you get to this dragon. But then there was a lot more going on as well, and honestly this book had me really stressed out for a lot of it. It was just so intense and I was always worried about what was going to happen. But I also think the pacing was quite good because it would have all these really intense, stressful bits, but then it would give you little breaks where things were more lighthearted and more fun. Also, in the end, everything wrapped up really well. I don't feel like there were really any loose threads, so I don't really know what's going to happen in the last trilogy. I'm pretty sure the quartet follows different characters, but the last trilogy is meant to be back to those same characters, and I have no idea what that might be about. And actually, I almost think things were wrapped up a little bit too nicely. I mean, our main character Fitz goes through so many horrible things in this series, and you do really feel for him. So it was nice for him to get a bit of happiness at the end. But I don't know, I almost feel disappointed that I wasn't bawling my eyes out at the end, even though there were definitely some really sad things that happened throughout the book. But I think overall I was just really excited in this book, and there were so many characters that I really loved. There is a character called Nettle, and I just loved her conversations with our main character Fitz and also with the dragon. So Nettle has some degree of dream magic and she's able to talk to this dragon. Well, not the dragon in the ice, a different dragon. There's also dragon sex, if that's something you're into. And there's also a character called Thick who has Down syndrome. It's not called that, but that's what it's supposed to represent as far as I can tell from looking on the internet. And I thought the representation was really well done. I don't have a lot of experience with people with Down syndrome, but again, research from the internet suggests that it was good. And I just think it did a really good job of making Thick a full character rather than just being all about his Down syndrome. And I thought the way that other characters interacted with him was realistic because they did have frustrations because of the way he acts sometimes, but also they were often really caring, and I thought it was just really nice and also sometimes really humorous. Honestly, Thick was one of my favorite characters in the book. So I've been really loving the whole Tawny Man trilogy, so it shouldn't really be a surprise to know that I love this one. And it also shouldn't be a surprise that I'm going to put this one through to the next round. Alright, so now we're up to our manga battle. We've got Full Metal Alchemist Volume 4 by Hiromu Awakawa up against The Girl from the Other Side Volume 2 by Nagabe. So, Full Metal Alchemist. This series is about two brothers who attempted to bring their mother back from the dead using alchemy, but things went wrong and now one of them has a metal arm and a metal leg and the other one is just like a soul stuck in a suit of armor. And they're part of the military in Japan, and they're also traveling around trying to find the Philosopher's Stone so that they can get their bodies back to normal. And in this particular volume, for most of it, they're just in hospital recovering from the battle at the beginning. So there wasn't particularly much going on. It was just the characters all being kind of cute. I suspect that people who really like this series really like it because they like the characters. I personally am a little bit bored. I wish there was a bit more story to what was going on. And I find the concept of alchemy really interesting, but I don't even think there was any alchemy in this whole volume. There was one thing that happened kind of near the end that was a bit upsetting, and I definitely see if you were attached to the characters, it would be a lot upsetting. But overall, I just felt at the end, it was okay. Sure, not a waste of my time, but not anything I'll particularly remember. Then in Girl from the Other Side, we have this young girl that's being looked after by this dark, scary demon type creature. And there's this empty village nearby that obviously the young girl came from, but her auntie is missing, and that's why the creature is looking after her. In this one, we do find out a little bit more about the auntie and kind of a little bit more about the dark creature, but overall it just felt very short, and I didn't feel like there was enough to this particular volume of the story. The very ending did promise that something might happen in the next volume, but I suspect that for me, I really just need to get a whole bunch of volumes of this and read them in one go, and then I might get more out of it. Because as it was, I got to the end and I just felt a little bit disappointed. And I think so for both of the books in this battle, that's kind of true. They were fine. I did really like the aesthetic of The Girl from the Other Side. So I guess I will put that one through to the next round, but neither of these were particularly my favorites. Then we've got a couple of more comic-y graphic novels. So we've got Bee and Puppycat Volume 2 by Natasha Allegri up against The Wicked and the Divine by Karen Gillan and Jamie McKelvey. So Bee and Puppycat is about this girl named Bee and her puppycat, and they are magical temps. So sometimes they go to this magical temp agency and they get sent to a different dimension in order to do some kind of magical job. It's super cute. Bee is super relatable in that she kind of sucks at life. She's kind of lazy and can't be bothered, but she has to do these temp jobs in order to make some money so that she can buy some food. And I also only just found out that there is a show that this is based off, and I started watching it and it's adorable, and I need to find time to watch some more of it because I think that will actually be more of what I'm looking for because it's more of a story. These graphic novel comic bind-ups are more like individual stories all done by different artists, and so some of the stories are better than others, some of the art is better than others. Mostly it's still super cute, but there are some that are less cute or more cute than others, and it just makes the whole thing a little bit incohesive. I would really like a bit more of a story with these characters. Still, I did really enjoy it. Then we've got The Wicked and the Divine Volume 2. I think this volume is actually called Fandemonium. So in this series, we have a world where every 90 years, about 12, 13, some number of gods come back to life. So basically these different teenagers will become gods. Once you become a god, you're treated like a celebrity and a pop star. Everybody loves you, but after a couple of years you're going to die. So it's exciting, you're gonna be god, but you're gonna die as well. In the first book, one of the gods is actually killed, and in the second book we've got this god fangirl who is trying to find out who killed that god, as well as she had something happen to her in the first book which makes her suspect that she might be a god now, or at least she hopes she might be a god. The art in this series is absolutely beautiful. The colors are so bright and vibrant, and all the different gods are just really interesting to look at. And I do think that the story in the second volume was a bit clearer than the first one. Maybe still not amazing. However, something happened at the end that completely changed the way the series must be going to continue. And so I really, again, need to find time to keep reading this series, because I suspect it's going to get better and better. Oh, but oh no. Which one am I going to put forward to the next round? Which one? I don't know, because I thought they were both good in certain ways and not so good in other ways. I guess what I should go on is my feeling when I finished reading each of these books. So when I got to the end of Bee and Puppycat, I was like, oh, that was nice. When I got to the end of The Wicked and the Divine, I was like shocked and in desperate need to continue the series. So I guess based on that reaction, I should put The Wicked and the Divine Volume 2 Fandemonium through to the next round. Okay, so we are on to round 2 now. For our first battle, we have The 100 by Cass Morgan up against Howl's Moving Castle by Diana Wynne Jones. This, at least, is a fairly easy battle for me. I did enjoy both of them, but The 100 was definitely a much more simple story, even though, you know, it's a science fiction with a lot of crazy ideas, but in a lot of ways it was just teens being teens in space, whereas Howl's Moving Castle was just amazingly unique in every single concept that was included, and the way it was written, even though it was an older writing style because it is an older book, it was just magical. So I'm going to put Howl's Moving Castle through to the next round. Then onto our fantasy branch, we've got Life and Limb by Jennifer Roberson up against Fool's Fate by Robin Hobb. So Jennifer Roberson is a fantasy author whose work I have liked before. I really liked her Tiger and Dell series, and I really liked her Chasuli Chronicles. But Life and Limb is going to be the first book in a series, and I don't think I'll be continuing it. It's kind of like Supernatural in that there is a bunch of fighting between angels and demons, except instead of classic rock, we've got like country and western music and culture. And also we've got all these other mythologies worked into the story, kind of like Supernatural. Also, we've got these two guys who were like kind of angels, kind of not, and they're having to work together. But really, the main character spent almost the whole story refusing to believe that he was some kind of almost angel, even though knowing the kind of book it was, like, it's obvious that he is, and him not believing it just meant that all these other characters had to do really long and boring explanations. And I was quite bored for a lot of it. As well, they're thrown into fighting demons with like no training, no information. It made no sense. I do think the characters themselves felt quite real, well developed, and I liked the way that the world brought in all sorts of different diverse mythologies, but I just don't think it really did anything unique that I haven't seen done before. And there are plenty of other urban fantasies that I think have probably done this angel and demon thing a lot better. So, putting this up against Fool's Fate, which I absolutely loved, it's not a surprise that I'm going to put Fool's Fate through to the next round. So for our next round, we have White Sand Volume 3 by Brandon Sanderson up against The Girl from the Other Side Volume 2. So this is my manga-ish branch. Now, White Sand isn't exactly manga, but it's manga inspired because I believe that Brandon Sanderson wrote the story of this when he was off being a missionary in Korea. And if I'm honest, I wish we had just gotten that book as he wrote it then, even though I'm sure his writing wasn't as good back then. But I just don't know that the story really translated well to the graphic style. That said, this third volume I did enjoy a lot more than the first two volumes. I finally figured out who all the characters were and what they were trying to do. I finally understood how the magic worked, and we actually learnt a little bit more about that. Now, I do remember that the art style changed at some point through the series, although I don't remember exactly when now. But it could be that that art style change is what helped to make things a bit clearer, or it could just be that this end part of the story was better. We do know that Brandon Sanderson is especially good at endings, so that could be why. I do think I would like to reread this whole series at some point and see whether on a reread I pick up on a little bit more understanding right from the beginning, because I don't think the story was terrible. In a lot of ways it had a lot of those Brandon Sanderson type ideas, like there's a cool magic system. Oh, I haven't really said what it's about. So we've got this guy who has had to take charge of this guild of people that have sand magic in this world where night and day don't change. So you've got the day side of the planet and the night side of the planet, and there's some people from the night side that have come to day side at the same time as he's trying to save his sand magic guild. And there's a bunch of twists and turns while these night side people and day side people get what they want. So we're battling this against The Girl from the Other Side Volume 2. I think that if I was putting this up against either of the first 2 volumes of White Sand, I would definitely go with The Girl from the Other Side. However, this 3rd volume I do think was a lot better. And because it just had a lot more story than The Girl from the Other Side, even though I liked the art style and the look of The Girl from the Other Side better, I think I would have to put White Sand 3 through to the next round. Then we have The Tea Dragon Festival by Katie O'Neill up against The Wicked and the Divine Volume 2, Fandemonium. So, The Tea Dragon Festival. This is the 2nd book that Katie O'Neill has put out all about these tea dragons, which are just these really adorable, cute little dragons that grow tea leaves and people use them to make tea. The art in this series is absolutely beautiful. The dragons are so adorable. There are some larger dragons in this 2nd book, and they are also beautifully drawn. I will say the 2nd book appears longer than the 1st book, but I did feel like a lot of the panels were just empty panels to pad things out a little bit, and they didn't necessarily add much to the story, although they were still really beautiful. And I do think the story was okay. It had some good messages in there, but it didn't hit me emotionally like the 1st book did. And maybe that was just that I wasn't in the right mood, but I just kind of read it and thought, oh yeah, that was nice. And that was all. So with that in mind, I'm going to put The Wicked and the Divine Fandemonium through to the next round. Okay, so now we're on to the semi-finals. Firstly, we have Howl's Moving Castle by Diana Wynne Jones up against Fool's Fate by Robin Hobb. And I loved both of these books. I do think though that even though Howl's Moving Castle was just a lot of fun and really unique, I was much more emotionally and mentally involved in Fool's Fate. And maybe that's just that Fool's Fate is the adult demographic and I'm an adult. You might have noticed I'm not a middle grade person. I mean, I'm sure when I was a middle grade person, I would have loved Howl's Moving Castle and I would have been like, what the hell is this Fool's Fate book? It's like a doorstop. It's not even a book. Why would you read that? Even though I liked reading when I was that young, but I think it would have still been a bit daunting for me. And I don't know that I would have really appreciated a lot of things happening in the story. So, demographics are important. I'm an adult, so I'm going to put Fool's Fate through to the next round. Then we have White Sand Volume 3 by Brandon Sanderson up against The Wicked and the Divine Volume 2, Fandemonium by Kieran Gillen and Jamie McKelvey. These were actually really similar in that they had interesting stories, but there were bits where I wasn't as engaged as I would have liked to be. But then in the end, I do feel like things pulled together. White Sand Volume 3 just like wrapped things up because it's the last book, whereas The Wicked and the Divine really made me want to continue because it's only the 2nd book in a longer series. Both of them have some really clever ideas in there, but I do think like the art is much better in The Wicked and the Divine. Definitely no competition in my mind. And even though I liked the story in White Sand, and there's some parts of the story of The Wicked and the Divine that I don't like, but that ending, I think just for my reaction at the ending, I have to put The Wicked and the Divine Volume 2 through to the next round. Okay, so now we are up to the finals, and it's going to be Fool's Fate by Robin Hobb up against The Wicked and the Divine Volume 2, Fandemonium by Kieran Gillen and Jamie McKelvey. I feel like this one's obvious, right? Right? Clearly, the winner is going to be Fool's Fate by Robin Hobb. love that series so much. I love the characters. I love everything that happened. It was an amazing reading experience, and it definitely is the champion for the second half of the month. But now the hard part. Because now we're going to put Fool's Fate up against the champion from the first half of the month, which was This Is How You Lose the Time War by Amal El-Matar and Max Gladstone. And honestly, I loved both these books so much. So This Is How You Lose the Time War is about these two agents on opposing sides of this time war. They're basically going back and trying to change the timelines so that their timeline in the future will be the one that happens. And they start secretly sending letters to each other, initially kind of taunting each other, and then eventually forming a friendship and maybe more. Absolutely beautiful. The writing is just a wonderful thing to consume. I haven't seen anyone who hasn't loved the writing. I know some people have found it a little bit confusing about what's happening, and they've wanted it to be a little bit more concrete and clear about what's happening, whereas it's not really about that. It's just about being beautiful and metaphorical, and I really loved it. But I loved Fool's Fate as well. I can't decide. And honestly, I already looked at my spreadsheet, and in my spreadsheet, I gave them both the same score. Do I have to pick a champion? I mean, it's my rules. I can break them. Can I? I told myself I would decide. So, I mean, I could just flip a coin. Can I just flip a coin? Do I have a reason why one was better than the other? Do I? Can I come up with any reason? I love the characters in both. The worlds in both are amazing in different ways. I guess maybe the only thing I could say is that the writing in This Is How You Lose the Time War is like absolutely beautiful. I still really like the writing style in Fool's Fate, and honestly, This Is How You Lose the Time War is like a 200-page book, and I don't know if I could handle a like 600, 800, how long is Fool's Fate? It's long. 900 pages! Fool's Fate is 900 pages, so I don't think I could take 900 pages of This Is How You Lose the Time War writing style. So I think for Fool's Fate, the writing style is perfect, but it's definitely true that the writing in This Is How You Lose the Time War is absolutely beautiful. So, I mean, it's so super close, and this isn't even true to say that This Is How You Lose the Time War is better, because really, I like them the same. But if I have to pick, I'm gonna pick This Is How You Lose the Time War as the champion of the month, because I can't think of any other way to make the choice. So that is all the books that I read in the second half of July. Do let me know if you have read any of them, because I would love to talk with you more about them down in the comments. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. I hope that you are doing well, keeping safe, and reading lots of good books, and I will see you next time.